I'm with Yuułuʔił̔atḥ First Nation, and though I says senior advisor, I am an employee, and I was their CFO. And then I said I would retire, and they suddenly became more special projects and try to help fulfill the gaps. My prime responsibility was to be a rep at the tables, fiscal tables, and the governance tables. And so, but in turn, I ended up picking up things like the data management because that was a gap. So I think you all know where Yuułuʔił̔atḥ is, and we are a treaty nation, has been explained. So I won't get into, all the details that because thanks so much there, Crystal, for doing the big picture perspective. So we're more focused on the day-to-day perspective. So basically, it's our journey from darkness towards dawn. And so on the next slide here, and I just want to stress that please, that there's no reflection of negativity on any parties. There's our path of building capacity with limited resources and challenging priorities. Because so basically, these pictures you see here, they're all of you clearly, I believe, that came from my cell phone. So I'm quite sure they are from Yuułuʔił̔atḥ and hopefully not from Gabriel. So what we have here is that basically about our journey, and the big cloud, of course, represents that. I think that is a big area of darkness. I'm in the sense of the data management. I started in 2020 as their CFO, and that was my first time as a CFO, even though I'm a CPA. And I was primarily for forensic accounting and management before that, including CAO with other nations. So basically this starts from 2020 to date. And so the whole picture is trying to move from this darkness with a few bright lights that appear, and we're heading towards dawn. And as we move towards dawn, so I'll give you the outline of what we'll be doing today. Basically, timeline and status by years, so selected projects, so overview, some lessons and tips, and then we'll give you the current projects. Nicola will be doing the Archiving Plus, Morgan on my slide. I'm looking at data management and policies, which is in the early stages. So looking at our timelines, we're going, as I noted, we're going to do our status and projects through, and the first year we have is 2020. And in 2020, when I came in, our data management was primarily the accounting systems. And I guess, CFOs and finance people, we end up with data management, trying to fill the gap because we understand it. But we really have to understand a lot of the information is not numbered, right? It's not financial. And I think that's where things really fall down, is that we really have to understand what type of data it is. And so we had just changed all our accounting systems before I came. And then, so we had no formal data policies. We had no central designated person. It was done on the side by the CFO. And then min staff was basically be called to, if the system broke down, we'll go and press a button and hopefully restart it. And if it didn't start, then call the external contractor who we had a good relationship with. Excel, mostly that was used, I said, outside of finance, but also it was quite surprising how finance still does use, I did use Excel, particularly when we're changing over systems. So we really started to switch to more of our accounting systems to do it, but the other departments, we did not have any formal systems. And then the big thing, I think the game changer happened in 2020 in our FFA dollars and that's a fiscal financing arrangement dollars. And we received money. And the whole thing is, though, is that when FFA, it goes into the general pot. You do not necessarily have to use it for the designated purposes. And so, but what we did that year, and since I was CFO, I made the recommendation to leadership. Let's look at certain funds that we receive, and rather just having them disappear and go into the general pot, that we created, and this was actually in our financial statements and still is, called internally restricted surpluses. And that's when, the leadership says funds comes in, instead of going to general surplus, we created that had to be used for the purpose designated. And this has made a difference, because now every year we've got this budget that we can use, and that it opens up our eyes that we need to use it rather than losing sight of it. So that was a significant. It gave us money for what we're doing now, including to support the co-op students that we have. So then in 2021, that came about, and I really would say that this was our enlightenment period. And enlightenment in the sense that I suddenly started to pay more attention to the DSC, rather than the little button would come up and says that I've got this DSC meeting. I started to listen in between my other duties and say, gee, there's really some good stuff coming out of here. I started to learn some terms, like data governance, indigenous rights, etc. I mean, respect to the information, listening to the individuals that, and it really did have an impact. Plus, also there was an experience that occurred in that the government has started to switch towards a needs-based funding, and we suddenly found ourselves that we didn't have the information, or we lacked the time to do it. And part of the result of that was that when the budget housing, we got, but here, 36 million, 3.6 million, and we were way down by all measurements. And when we looked at it, we said, gee, this is, why did this occur? But we'll get into more details about that later. So basically, we got and also I got a seed of an idea. Another nation were filling their gaps in respective policy by co-op students. So all three started coming together. We had a bad experience where we didn't have the appropriate data, and we felt we got less than we should. We were continuously being asked by government levels to prove our needs base, and it's just not financial information. And also recognizing that we did have resources available and discussions with with DSC. So with that, we decided to assess our expert advisor, which was from November 2021 to January 22, on how to best build capacity. And I'll give that as an example coming up. So on the next slide, 2022. So this is where where everything started to coalesce. And we engaged co-op students, supported by external data management consultant and other resources they needed. Because and I was appointed as a supervisor since I was since the budget sort of came under me, as well as the fact that I had the most data management knowledge, again, mostly financial. And so we went to Yuułuʔił្�atḥ, and we hired two last summer, and one was policy focused, and one was to do with the data management side, and he was a business student. And the first thing we did was a very basic step. We decided to take an inventory of all our hardware and software, and see who was connected to our system, and who should be. We did come up with a few surprises, which we had to connect, which we had to disconnect. We developed, and then we looked at the development of a database to summarize, track, and control our contribution agreements and proposals. So that commenced, and that was something that I've always that I had developed before in Excel way back when I first became involved with First Nations, 2007. To track it. And so it was an expansion of this this Excel, but making it more of a database of excess, and to be able, because one big weakness always found was how do you meet your deadlines for reporting, but more importantly also about proposals. Proposals would go in, which finance never knew anything about. Then money would suddenly arrive, and you say, "What's this?" And what's this? This financial information, where did it come from? So it was really we did send out some information on that before. So if anyone wants any information on the database, that was done with an external advisor with the co-op student. It worked very well. We evaluate options of software. Before, departments would just go and get software. In our case, we, with the co-op student and the external advisor, we were able to do a full assessment of the software. And the benefits of that was quite significant because we got a lower price. It was because the original software had not identified every area, and we able and in turn was some things had in there that we didn't need. So we saved significant thousands of dollars, which more than covered the co-op student and the advisor, and the price savings happens every year. And we also got a better product because we had recognition of needs. Because there's one thing that came out of the study we had done in 2021 with the Yuułuʔił្�atḥ consultant was that it really brought together departments, because they went out and they did focus groups with all of the managers. And when they did that, suddenly became aware of the importance of data management and really the lack of information they had and the lack of information that the senior management had as to what departments was up to. So that was a very big step, and because we had to work with other departments, and the other departments suddenly recognized the importance of working together. They said, gee, we work together, we actually end up with a better product, and we also end up saving money. So the final thing there was that the identification of consideration to include in data governance. So when the co-op student was doing that, he also cooperated with the policy student, the one that was doing the law student who was doing the policy, and made a list of considerations that we should come up, that should be addressed in the policy, which will be discussed with by Morgan. But also what's important was in 2022, we got 9.2 million in our housing from government as versus the 3.6, and we'll get into why that occurred. So on the next slide, which we have in 2023, where are we? Well, Archiving Plus, which Nicola would talk about, and when we really recognize the plus, I mean, Nicola will get into about the vision, the planning, and implementation steps for that. Because just so often what we have noticed is that so easy to say archiving is, and we actually ran into this. We say, oh, go hire John, go hire three co-op students, so they can go collect it, they can go search everywhere for information and start inputting data. And Nicola will explain why that approach is not ideal, and through what the good work that she is doing. Then we're looking at development of data governance and management, which again, Morgan would touch base on. We have the, in process is a GeoKeeper, which Lands is using, as well as our cultural department. And now we're also looking at assessing options for Lands registry software, which Lands is using. And this one here, just, the first thing that happened was that the department contacted John, a little bit about, you're supposed to be in charge of our data management. Who do I contact? They said, well, we're one nation that's doing a lot, and that was NISCA. And so we put them in contact with NISCA, and we've got a consultant that will be coming down to help us with this land registry. So this shows the importance of collaboration and reaching out to other nations. So we're not behind it. So we can move fairly quickly on that, because that's very important to us. And the last thing is we're commencing to have the process to have timely, reliable housing information. Because one thing that came out of the budget of 2022 is that nations really want to look at the demand side of people coming back to TSL lands. So we met with CMHC, looking at what resources we can have to assist us with the both helping people off TSL as well as getting the data. CMHC has significant resources. They have special departments, we found out, and funding available to help you with getting the data that you need to have sound housing practices. And so all this we just learned. I was going to say last week, but it's actually 2 weeks ago, or maybe it's last week. Yeah, it is last week. So just 6 days ago. So we just learned that recently, and we'll be accessing that for them to help us how to get data, better data for housing, not just the quality of the housing, but more importantly, as to what the future demand is and needs. So that's 2023. And then what we're going to do on our next section, we're just going to do some selected projects. The first one was the expert advisor's findings of 2021, which I mentioned. Then the file reports, housing, and the archiving plus, which would be Nicola, governance and management, and Morgan. And as I noted, is that if you need anything on the contribution agreement, do contact me. I can send the info, and also the one that has it, you can also ask Mika, she has it as well. So our expert advisor's finding report. So what they found was, and this was done through the funding that we kindly received through the SIG group. We decided to start with the basic, and it was to do with software. And I said it brought everyone together, which was a very good exercise. It was minimal. They identified, and many of this we knew, but it was really, opened up our eyes when you see writing is that people, they had minimal software, even for the basic software that they used. I would get calls for people, John, can you help me with Excel? And I don't consider myself a good Excel user, but I just happen, but people, but compared to others, I knew a little bit more. So minimal training, inconsistent software versions across the organization. We were purchasing some duplicates as well. We had no consistent formatting or work style. We had no file naming processes and organizations of files and folders. And their recommendation, standardization of filing systems, naming formats, sufficient data training, and continuity in data collection. But more importantly, as I said, it was really bringing every manager together to recognize that we have to address data management, and it also realized to the leadership and senior management that we've got to do something about it. Plus, we have the funding to do something about it. We have access to resources because of the DSC group, as well as external consultants. So it was eye-opening in that aspect. The next one, this is the one which much appreciation to Katie of our lands department, who provided me with the information, and I'm not involved with this. Really, my role was just to hook up the lands department with the consultant and with the co-op student to do the assessment. Of the options we had for the software last year, and with GeoKeeper that came out. But everybody has different needs, so it's not that I'm promoting it, just stating what we did. And it's for field reports, and it replaces paper. And it has good, useful information, the GPS coordinates, and very versatile. It's being used by our lands and cultural heritage. Project uses, I spelled that wrong, that should be crab monitoring, sorry. Patrol reports, incident reports, micro trawling that has to do with when they go out and they take they get a fish, they take a little needle, they stick a needle in it and do some testing on it. It's collected DNA of fish, and it pinpoints exactly where that occurred. So now it's starting to be done. It's just being implemented now, and also the ecological field work. And like we quite often, our heritage also goes out, heritage department, where they have to go for cultural testing of sites about where burial sites may be, or cultural information. They can actually enter it right there in the system, and it's effective. So we're just at the testing stage, and it should be fully implemented this summer. And the next slide just shows you a little printout of what it is. It gives the details, and like it says where it is, and we'll have, as I said, the exact location. So the next one was housing, and I said, remember, 2021 3.6, 9.2. So we were 20th. We moved to 5th per there. But it's not just the numbers. It's really identifying the needs, fulfilling. We had like 30 condemned housing at the time. I think, by the time we were finished, it was about 50 condemned housing. But in 2021, we were using old information and our interpretation of reading Canada's information was that if it was privately owned, we could not include it in our sample, in our information. So we didn't include it in the old data from 2019. And so, and we understood, well, maybe you could, it was a gray area. So in 2022, when we fully participated in the negotiations of all the groups, the 38, the 30 nations, 20 odd nations, as to what will be the definition that will be included to consider. And so we made clear that it was any housing that we inherited at times of treaty that was condemned. It could be considered as condemned, even though it was private housing. And that was a good change that worked to our benefit. So it shows the importance of being involved with determining what data criteria it would be. That's a step sometimes we forget, is that, we'll just collect the data, but who sets the criteria? So we have to be, proactively involved as a nation to make sure that we understand what the criteria is, as well as any influence positively that we can have. And that made a big difference in that. And plus two, we hired, as I said, all the we actually spent internal sums on overtime, et cetera, to make sure we had thorough information this year. So it was the extra work, making sure that we clearly understood what the parameters were, and having influence on that parameters to the positive side, because it just didn't make sense to us if we inherited 30 odd houses at times of treating that were condemned, that just because they were privately owned, because we gave them to the people, that it shouldn't be considered in our statistics. That was our interpretation, rightly or wrongly, but we made sure it was clear this time. And then, okay, where was I? Here we are. And so this is where so basically what I just said, but the time invested. And so here what we're doing is in 2023, as I noted before, is that we really feel that the next time it comes up for funding, they'll be looking at the demand side. So we're already working on this, on how, with CMHC, on how we can look to measure demand from off and on TSL. So we're prepared for the next round of funding with Canada and with our other SIG nations. So we're trying to be proactive. So what are our lessons learned and tips from all this? One thing, obtain and keep funding segregated. We've been able to identify some more sources. One of the co-op students, they identified some more additional sources, and they were able to do it during their work. And I think that came about, Nicola can talk about it, was how when reaching out to other nations, she became aware of funding available, and she quickly got in the application, and also that FFA funding. Internal capacity and have access to export support. So internal capacity is still an issue. Just as an example, I did intend to. I did block off to attend the last 3 days of this conference, but I couldn't attend yesterday because suddenly other priorities came up, and even today after this, I have to address other priorities. So it's really, how do we address this internal capacity? We're doing it with co-op students, and we're making sure that we have that we do incur the cost to ensure that they support it. And I try to give at least 2 minutes a week to supervision. And I'm probably not exaggerating that much. You can ask them, but we try our best working together. Even basic projects as taking inventory can have significant rewards, and that's where we started from. And also of having it assessed, as I noted, that was a very good learning experience at first, and like the departments, when they saw the benefit, they were so glad we got involved, so glad, first, we got to get this software, we don't have time to assess it. But at the end, they said, gee, we're really glad we did that. And understanding parameters, as I noted, what are the parameters with how the funds with like the housing funds are going to be divvied up, and make sure we have the correct data. Interacting with other nations. this has been very positive. Like I said, like the co-op idea to do with the assessing our software options. We went out to other nations for, if what were they using for archiving and community knowledge, and when also with Morgan may speak on it in respect to make sure that asking about other nations, reaching out, gave each of the co-op students names of who to contact, and everyone has been very good and cooperative. And so even though we have progressed well, giving overall factors, still need the designated position. But one thing too, as I noted, it's a this plus vision. Oh, because one thing I always feel, and even though my background is accounting, I do believe that is that you just can't get cut up on numbers, and so it's important to really make sure that a purely functionary approach can be a hindrance. We have to recognize that, and on the next slide here is that really vision is important to overcome hindrances of a purely functionary or a financial approach. Because it's also easy, as I said, to rush into, pick up the first systems, gather input, and move along. But there's so much more than that. Because with vision, we can proceed on a path that goes beyond the function, a path that can assist with healing, reconciliation, treaty fulfillment, protection of rights and well-being of the community. And you're going to see this with Nicola's presentation about the approach that Nicola is developing and moving forward with. And also, I think what's important is that we have the tips. As I said, DSC has been very influential. I do think it can continue to play a role, and also reaching out to elders can assist with vision. And many of the meetings, like some of the ones we've had with DISC, where we hear from elders from other nations, can also be very wide-reaching and have an impact. By taking these lessons learned and moving forward, I think it will enable us to at least to get to the point, that's the next slide, to dawn. It may not be a total. So then with the dawn, we can move towards a bright day for data management. And that is actually a picture from